tossed me an orange and I totally butterfingered it and dropped it in the lake, and I'm always getting orange jokes now. And just let me know if you can hear me through your microphone and all that jazz. And then why don't I just shouldn't drift too much. And we're live? Yeah. Alright, how's the volume level? We're pretty good? Alright, cool. I could probably not leave my phone in my pocket, but here we are. Well, good morning. I'm Evrett Fitting Green. I'm one of the summer biologist interns with LPC, and I'm here to do a nest inspection and collect eggshells. So generally we collect eggs and eggshells. The eggs I know that we've been running tests on to check for contaminants, different levels. I think we've done about, I want to say maybe like 1,000 eggs, which could be wrong, so don't quote me on the number, but it's fairly expensive, so it's awesome that we've been able to do a bunch of them. And then also we just collect eggshells. I think that they run tests on those, I'm not sure, but also just good to have for records and that kind of thing. The other important thing we do is wear gloves, which is less about protecting us and more about like making sure we're not contaminating the eggs themselves. Just like because a lot of the stuff we test for is, you know, found in like sunscreen, or if you're wearing a rain jacket, that's Gore-Tex. So just trying to make sure that those, like, nothing from there is getting on your specimens for when we run it. We also use Ziploc bags exclusively because those don't have any of those contaminants in them. So, small bag here. Oh yeah, these have definitely been around for a little while. The question being, would this raft support my weight? But I don't want to test that theory. Yeah, what is the best way to do this? As easy as it looks. Oh, wait, there we go. And there goes the hat. I need like one of those trash grabbers, you know what I mean? Oh, yeah. It's hard to try and like reach in here and get the shells out. Oh, or I could just like take the lid off, but I don't know if that's biting off. That would probably be the easiest thing.
Would it be easier from the other side?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's a little closer, so I can try and scoot the boat over there. Maybe that'll help. Just because I can't really like reach. I can kind of reach in, but it's a little difficult. So maybe, yeah, let me see if I can cruise it around to the other side and try that. Maybe that will help. Maybe I should do it. It's a little closer on this side.
You won't be able to see it very well.
Hmm? Is it harder to see?
Well, yeah, the boat's in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really reach. I think I can reach more from this side to actually collect the shells. Maybe I can try and squeeze it out of the way, but... Oh yeah, that's much better. I don't know if you can like hear me too much if I talk from in here.
We're good.
We're good? Alright. Well, I know that we hatched 2 chicks, but it's interesting to see that there isn't like a super definitive pattern of like separation of the shards from the eggshells, which is interesting. But I guess that sort of makes sense because they hatch like spread apart, so it's not just like at the same time, they're asynchronous, so that would kind of make sense. And it's also interesting just to see like what kind of nest loons have built, because it does kind of depend. They're all sort of different. Some build like nice, really like big bowls. Others are flatter, just kind of a scrape. This one seems sort of like an intermediate type, where it's somewhere sort of like halfway between like a nice bowl and a scrape, but they still got a pretty solid bowl going here. The other thing we do is also get GPS coordinates for all of the nests and rafts, just for our like data collection and all that, and helping future biologists find them, because these rafts are easy to find, but the natural nests are a whole nother ball game. Those can be super hard to spot. That's most of the shells. Oh, or not. It's a little hard to see with all the sort of leaf litter in here, but here we are. We've got a couple more to grab. And that's pretty much it. That's all the shells. So I think we can sort of call it with the egg collection. The next thing to do is I have to get a GPS coordinate for this nest. I've got one that connects via my phone to Bluetooth. It's also cool if you can see little, there's a couple little mussel shells around here, so I would guess that maybe the loons are eating them because I don't know how they would have gotten up here otherwise. Or they could have just gotten pulled up with all the moss and stuff that we put on here, I'm not sure. But let's see. Usually I'd Sharpie the bag and label it, but I seem to have forgotten my Sharpie, like I forgot my pencil. Let's see, I'll grab that GPS locator. This one turn on. It seems like that needs to be charged, so I can always come back and do that another day. But essentially I just put it on the middle of the nest and it connects to my phone, and then I record the points. It just has a higher accuracy, and then it makes it easier for me to collect things because I need to like put my phone in the nest and then lean my head in to try and read it. But yeah. And the other things we do for our data collection is we note like the human activity for nests. And then we also do aerial cover and sort of like lateral cover in about I believe it's a meter radius. So this nest isn't like the most sheltered of the nests I've seen, but it's in a fairly isolated spot as far as traffic goes. So that's good, but a lot of them some of them are definitely in higher traffic areas, and they can still pull off chicks, so they're resourceful birds. But, and then we actually just banded these two loons last night and got the chick. The male was surprisingly heavy. I think it was like 6.15 kilograms, which is one of the heavier loons we have in the state, so that was pretty cool. I was kind of surprised. It was big. Can't remember the conversion off the top of my head, but that's like at least 12 pounds. Might be more like 15. I think it might be 0.6 kilograms to 1 pound or something reverse like that. I don't remember my conversions, but that's a solid sized loon. No, I think it's 0.6 pounds to kilograms. So then it's the reciprocal, which is, I don't want to do math, it's too early for math. And then I don't remember the weight on the female. I think it might have been more in the 4 kilogram range. And then we banded the male because the male was unbanded, and we just logged the female, which is neat. And we also weighed the chick. The chick was around, I want to say, 300 grams, which... And I think this nest is about 10, they hatched about 10 days ago, right? So that's a little underweight. They should be, I think, more in the 400 range, so I wonder if the one that was predated was the earlier hatching chick, which is, it's hard to know, like, for sure, but it's possible, just because the chick does look smaller for something that's 10 days old. It's really interesting. Birds really grow up at such an accelerated rate. It's quite interesting. My professor, who's a big ornithologist, would always say that they live on the edge of evolution, which I always think is interesting. They're just so like fine-tuned to live in such a hostile environment. It's really quite interesting. But so they do grow up very fast compared to humans, and all that. Pretty much floating in a lake from the day they're born. That's an accomplishment. But
what color are the male's bands? Do you remember?
Ooh, I should should know because I wrote this down. I think it's. I think it's blue stripe over orange on the left leg, and then I think it's blue stripe over silver on the right. And that should be what it is because I wrote them down. Yeah, I think it's blue stripe over orange. No, it's blue stripe over orange dot on the left leg, and then blue stripe over silver, or it might just be blue. I think it's just blue over silver on the right leg. We'll do like a. I only just learned this recently, but every year they pick like a different combo to go with the silver band as like the color for that year. So we can tell sort of like what well, I guess it's just as like a record keeping thing, so you kind of know like when the loons were banded, and it keeps things in rotation, which is interesting. But
how's the loon population, the chick population? We see it like above or below normal, or pretty?
I can't speak to the whole of New Hampshire just because the data's all not in yet. It's not compiled, but I think we're having a fairly good year, at least my experience on my lakes. It's sort of the double-edged sword of all this rain. It's been really quiet, so that gave a lot of the nest loons a chance to just have some decent quiet in the early year, which I think was really good for them. But with the high water levels, we've also had a couple nests that are sort of have been flushed off, or flooded, or just they haven't been able to nest, which is a real shame. I think last I checked, I think we're like half a foot above full pool for the lake, which is, I think we're above, I don't know, at least for this time period, I think we might be above record levels. I'd have to check. There's you can find it, like, Department of Environmental is in New Hampshire, I don't remember. There's too many different acronyms for that, I always forget. But, yeah, the water levels have been really high, which has certainly been an issue. Less with the floating rafts, and sometimes they'll nest on a sort of a more floating hummock, which also gives them a bit more flexibility. But it's just it's also an issue of climate change where we have that rain that you normally get in a more spread out time becomes very concentrated, and we have these big rainstorm events of like 1 to 2 inches. And, that obviously falls in the lake, and then you have the effect of calculating the whole watershed. So 2 inches of rain means a lot more water level rise than just 2 inches, if I'm remembering all that correctly. So it's, it's certainly something that I think is messing with them because of that. It's just a very rapid increase, which is an adjustment for anything, really.
So a couple questions here. One wanted to know, are there still 2 chicks? Maybe talk about the predation of the first chick happened when? The first day? Second day?
That's a good question. I think it was sometime last week. I'd have to check. As far as I know, it was an eagle that got it. So, and I wonder, I don't know if it was like an adult or a juvenile. I have been told that the juveniles tend to cause more problems than the adults. And I haven't seen like too many sort of eagle-loon interactions. They happen sometimes, but I could certainly see how an eagle would go after a loon chick. So I don't know. It could be. I know that there are some eagles in this area that I've seen that are sort of always around. And it sort of is a part of nature. At LPC, we're very much not taking an anti-eagle stance. Nature is nature. They're going to get predated. It's much better that they get predated by something, a natural predator, rather than humans. It's sad, but that's sort of the circle of life. And it's a lot of times why they hatch 2 chicks. A lot of actually raptors and other large birds will lay 2 eggs every year, and one of those eggs actually is specifically like smaller, and that's a spare in case one of their eggs dies. And it's similar with loons. They'll have 2 eggs and they're hatched asynchronously.
and I think it can be up to, it's like 48, maybe to 72 hours between the hatchings, but the LoonCam would have caught that, so that would be really interesting.
Yeah, it was 62 between the laying of the egg, 62 hours, and then I think it was, oh boy, we've got one of the chatters, the eagle keeper with us precisely, but I think it was about 12 to 14 hours between hatches.
The hatches, 12 to 14?
Yeah, they came out real quick. One was in the night, the next one was the next morning.
Interesting. I guess at that point, I don't know if the weight is much of a, I don't know, I mean that.
But it was 62 days later in being laid, which is quite a bit. So it had less time in the egg.
I wonder why, because I know that we've certainly had a few nests that were lit, at least in my lakes, that were really early on, and unfortunately quite a few of them have been over incubating. And that's another issue we've been running into this year with quite a few of the nests, which is a real shame. And I don't know why that's happening. It could be something with contaminants. Or whatnot, I really don't know. But you know, loons are a really good indicator species in that way because they eat fish, and anything that's in the lake is going to get into the fish. You know, I sort of have to think of that pyramid. The higher you go up the pyramid as the food chain, you concentrate all of those contaminants and pesticides. That's why one of the reasons why DEET was such an issue, and DDT. Because all those predators are really high up on the food chain, it's that concentration and they live so long that the bioaccumulation of a lot of those pesticides really plays an issue, especially, I mean, we don't truly know how long loons live for. We only started banning them in the 90s, and we're starting, I think we had one recently from mortality, maybe it was from like Maine or from Mock, I don't remember specifically, but the loon had been banned in like the mid-90s, and it had just passed away. And that's, you know, assuming it's abandoned as an adult, plus, it might have been late 90s, but that makes it like at least 30 years old. So, you know, in the next sort of 10, 15 years, we'll start to get some hard data on how long we actually live for, which will be really interesting.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about what's it like to be an intern at LPC? How did you get the job, and what's your day-to-day activities?
Yeah, so I basically found there's a job board online that's called like I think it's Ornithology Exchange, where basically if you're looking for any sort of jobs in bird research, a lot of stuff gets posted there from, you know, master's level, PhD, all sorts of to summer internships. And so I just had seen this and I applied for it because it seemed cool. And
you taken a course? What's your studies?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a sort of, I started school, I think it was I graduated high school summer of 2019, and then I actually did a year and a half of engineering. I had like 2 semesters. My second semester was when COVID hit, so I took a semester off. And I actually woofed on a small organic farm, which was a really cool experience. And then I, went back and did another semester of engineering, and I just sort of thought, like, why am I doing this? I like to be outside. I want to like protect the world. Like it was really cool to be somewhere that allowed me to just sort of be outside every day and like have that connection with nature, and realizing that, I don't know, like in 30 years I'd like to leave a positive impact on the world and do something that I can look back on and be proud of. And sitting in a cubicle working on CAD is not really what I'd call that. So,
What's a day in the life of an intern like?
Well, for me it involves a lot of boat driving, which, has its own. We do a lot of, for me at least, I sort of have a different experience because I'm the biologist on Winnipesaukee. So, generally most interns will have a region, and they're covering a variety of lakes in that region. I basically only cover one lake, which is different because they'll, do like 6 points a day. I could do like 10 or 15 depending on the season. Also, I tend to do a lot of like signs and putting signs out, building signs,
moving them when the anchors shift, especially with the high water levels. We've had a couple that have just, been sitting there for the whole season and have now just come loose because what happens is that when we drop it, we try to make sure there's a certain amount of slack so that that anchor is sitting on the bottom. But as the water level rises, it pulls that up, and then as wake hits it, it can just kind of start to drift because the rock, that brick isn't fully on the bottom, and it starts pointing up, which is not great because we don't want boats to hit that. It's not good. But we also put reflective tape on them, so they're fairly, they're either, if you can kind of see this one, this is what they look like. Can they make that out, or?
Yeah.
Cool. And then I actually have a jig sign in here, so I can kind of show them what that looks like. And then this one doesn't have reflective tape on it, but we put these sort of orange chick signs over them. So they're fairly hard to miss something like this. If it's at night and you're not paying attention, yeah. But we put them within 150s, and usually try and put them alongside any channel markers or whatnot, just to make sure that we're not making them hazards that are easy to hit. And then a lot of data collection, so we keep an eye on the loons when they're nesting, how often we see them, overall presence. We look for trying to identify pairs in a certain area. Also, if we see any larger groupings, that's important, just to note different, territorial displays. One thing I know that John asked me to sort of keep an eye on is keep an eye on how the loons are doing with the heat. A lot of times I'll see them panting when they're on the nest as the weather's gotten so warm, so I note that down. And then we also have a lot of different, data entry to keep track of it. We put it all into forms, and that all goes online into LPC's database. And then, various emails and other stuff around the day that we do. I go get gas for the boat a lot. I take Harry, our director, out sometimes to go and talk to volunteers and, give them pamphlets and that kind of stuff, so that's fun. But yeah, it's overall a cool job. My mom is in the area visiting, so it's nice. I sort of took her on a ride along yesterday, and we went and surveyed a couple points, and I was showing her where to find the nest and see the loons. And I will give her credit; she did actually spot some before me. I was suspicious at first; they were being sneaky, but she was right. There were loons there. That was fun.
What was banding like? Describe what goes
banding?
on there.
Banding is an interesting experience. At school, we have a small banding station, so I've done, small passerine land birds. You can hold it in your hand. But a loon it's like a small dog, really, except it can stab you. Not that they really do often, so it's definitely an interesting experience. Usually, basically, we go out on the lakes, and when I'm driving, just because we don't have a lot of people who have boating licenses. John is in the front of the boat, one of the staff biologists, and he basically will capture the loon with a net, and then we grab it, and one of us will hold it. You sort of put it in your lap, and then you sort of tuck the head through here, and you put your arm down just to kind of hold it so it can't get its beak loose and stab you. And then we get readings on the legs. So there's like the width of the legs, which is really important for bands. Because we size them so that it's not going to squeeze the loon's leg or impact it in that way, and then the length, which is tarsus width and tarsus length, and the length is actually at an angle. I can't remember. I think it's the point just above. They have that little toe to basically the feather line on the opposite side, and that's what that is. And then we also sometimes do beak measurements. We draw blood to test for contaminants, lead levels, all that sort of stuff, and we'll weigh them. And it's really just to try and get that picture of how, a loon changes over the course of its life, which is really interesting. And then, put the bands in them. So we do a combination of 3 color bands and 1 silver USGS band. So that's a hard-coded number assigned to that bird. So if you've seen them, they're silver. They have a 1-800 something band. If you find that, then you call it, and that's been
that program has been around for years. I don't know how long, but so those are really important because that means when we recapture that bird, we know exactly who that bird is, even if the color bands are different. And we use, off the top of my head, I think it's 6 colors. We have red, orange, yellow, and then blue. Red, orange, yellow, blue, white, and green. And I think that's it. And then those can either be in stripe or in dot. But the thing is that it's whatever the prevailing color of the band is. So like a green dot is just going to have a small dot carved out of it, so it'll be white. But some of them also have sort of the background plastic is black, so it'll be different, which is helpful for identification. I know yellow has a black background, which is helpful because orange doesn't. So as they fade and whatnot, and weather, you can sort of, it gives you a better shot at differentiating them, which is good. It's definitely something that you just need practice on, because you can learn, you can have your sheet and know what they're going to be, but identifying them in the field is a completely different situation. If you're lucky, sometimes you can see them through the water if it's shallow and the loons get close, but often you really have to wait until they're preening and they'll, do their leg shaking or flash it up. And even then it's difficult because they move their legs around, and a lot of times I realize I'll flip what the band is because it's just hard to tell, and you have 2 seconds to really get a good read on it. Or they'll move. Sometimes they're nice, but oftentimes they're not really good. They're very easy to spot.
How long does it take the band once you get them?
It depends. I think now that we've all been doing it a little bit longer, I think around 20 minutes. We had one last night when we weren't putting new bands on it. That was just collecting everything and getting it weighed and doing all that. I think it was 35 or so minutes for the one that was that we were putting new bands on. It depends on the loon too, because some of them can be, are fairly easy to work with, and some of them just, don't. I wouldn't really enjoy what we're doing to them personally, but it's, it's not really painful.
Is it true that they tend to poop when you hold them?
That is definitely true. You will get pooped on. Because it's stressful. We sort of grab them at night, and we do it during. We do it when the chicks are around, also, just so that they're tend to stay in one place. I don't know if you've ever tried to capture a loon in the water, but it's easier said than done. They're fast. So once they're in the water, once they dive, you're kind of done. So yeah, we do it during chick season. We'll also sometimes do off the nest captures, especially if they're over incubating. We've done that a few times just because at that point, the eggs aren't going to hatch, and it's an easy way to ban them, which is good.
So while you were talking there, just move the camera over here. We got reports that the 62 hours, 0.3 hours between the eggs laid, and it was 17 and a half hours between the
So 17 and a half. I mean, that's close to a day, which is a lot for a bird. I think some songbirds can be flying in is it a week, 10 days, something like that, after they're hatched, which is crazy.
And how long before the chicks will be flying?
I can check my notes. I think it's more like 12 weeks. At this point, just throw this anchor out.
How about feeding themselves? How about feeding themselves? How long?
It again takes longer. You know what? I have this whole binder with all the loon facts in it, so why don't I just grab that? Because I think that would probably make it a bit easier to answer these questions.
presenting the LoonCam overview. We've got about 85 slides to go through, most of it pictures and video clips and stuff like that. Don't think we're going to be broadcasting it. The technical problems, quality problems, just sort of keeps it local. So if you're local to New Hampshire, please stop by the Loon Center tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, and we'll talk to you then.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone just made that out, but I just heard a yodel, and I'm guessing that's probably from this loon pair, which is sort of over that way a little ways.
Yeah, when I was coming up here, because I go right through their brooding area,
Mm-hmm.
I saw 3 loons, and 2 of them seemed like they were circling, like they're still trying to do territorial issues.
Yeah, that circle dancing is sort of a low-level territorial display. There's, it's interesting. Loons are, there's sort of, you have territory and home range. So territory is like where the birds really live, like their nest area, and that's more heavily defended than, say, home range. Like home range can intersect with other birds, but they really don't like stuff getting too close to their nest. So if loons get close, they will hop off, and it'll be violent. But usually with most animals, it's not favorable to either of them to have that happen. So there's generally stages of posturing sort of before that'll happen. You'll have the circle dancing, which is pretty low-level territorial dispute. As you go up, there's also the males will yodel at each other, and they'll sort of penguin dance and flap across the water to test endurance. One of the little tidbits I always like to use is that there's actually species of lizard that do push-ups. And so that's their sort of version of, because for each animal, their goal is to survive and produce offspring, and getting injured is a detriment to that, and they don't want to do that, so they try to avoid fighting if at all possible, just because it doesn't make sense for either of them. It's, want to win, but at what cost? You risk getting injured, getting hurt, which is, if you're an animal, really not great. And we have seen that loons really do seem to heal pretty well. I should remember this, but they have a plate that's in sort of the bottom, and I don't think it's the sternum. But we find a lot of puncture wounds in those that have been healed over, or that they have puncture wounds in them. So they can take some damage and heal from it. So they're sturdy birds. I believe the question was about the chicks. So I have a...
Yeah, how long, I guess a couple questions. How long before they fly is the first question.
Yeah, that's what I can try and find here.
When do they start feeding themselves?
Yeah, let's see. It takes about... weeks until they start to be able to practice flying, and it's that point at which and then usually by about 12 weeks of age they're fully fledged, so they have all their flight feathers. So that's also part of it, is when they have their chick feathers they can't fly. This also happens with loons in general. There's a period of when they're molting, and they'll do it, I believe, I have to check, because there's different birds will have different amount of molt cycles. Some of them do once a year, sometimes it's twice a year. They'll have like a migration molt, breeding molt. Loons, I believe, just molt once a year, might be twice. I'd have to double check, because it also is important, because their feathers do get worn as they exist, and this isn't something as much that's done during banding, but when I've done banding for small passerines, it's really, you check the molt limit, because you can see sort of how worn their feathers are, and at least before migration they will have new feathers, because it's, it's a long journey and it takes them a while, so it's important to have new feathers. Let's see if it's in here somewhere.
Just to catch people up, this nest produced 2 chicks. One was lost, we believe, to an eagle after a day or so. The other chick is health. Well, I saw it this morning swimming with one of its parents. So it's in the brooding area. There were 3 other loons in the same brooding area, so it's a crowded space. But yeah, the other chick is apparently still doing well.
So yes, they do actually have 2 molts. The first is between late August and October, which is, I would say, probably that's like their fall. That's them them shedding their breeding plumage to get into their plumage for the winter, because they winter on the oceans. And they'll see they become more of this like brownish color, a lot like the juveniles. And then they go out to the ocean for the winter, and then they'll come back. And then it's not saying when. Oh, and then yeah, in between late December and early April, they'll be flightless for 2 to 3 weeks. I think that's when they. Yeah, late December, early April is when they switch back to their other plumage, in preparation for flying back to Winnipesaukee or wherever else they're living. It's actually interesting. The males return typically first by, but it's not by long, more like 1 to 2 days. So I guess they're sort of staking out their territory.
I think we're out of questions. Got anything else, Evrett? Full of knowledge this morning. You're the one living the life here.
Yeah, it's got its ups and downs. The sunny days are nice. You also, you'll get caught in rainstorms. It's been a really rainy year, which is, have its own share of struggles. But it's nice to be outside every day. I can't complain about that.
All right. Well, thanks for your time today.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching.
No problem. If you get any further questions or whatnot, you can let me know. But yeah, does it seem like things are sort of wrapping up?
Yeah, there's not many questions in the queue here.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm down to hang out and give it a minute if you want, but if you want to shut it down.
No, we can spend another minute just sort of sitting here.
Yeah, it's a nice morning, very quiet. The breeze is starting to come in a little bit.
No great herons behind us, which is.
No.
We saw quite a few of them during the nesting season.
Yeah, my mom was actually telling me she was in New York a few weeks ago and saw a bunch of nests, gray heron nests, which was interesting. They're cool. There's a couple. I do tend to see them around here, so I know that there definitely is one that lives in this area, but where it is, that's the question.
So we'll save this video, and people can watch it. They can rewind, to the beginning. I think we're saving the chat as well. We can't save the chat for the big long ones because it rolled off. But this one should be put into the LPC library. Yeah, it's a beautiful day, huh?
It is, yeah. Seems like we're getting some nice weather towards the end of the season.
Water temperature's 79 degrees. I'm showing 3 feet of my depth finder, so it's not real deep here.
No, I wonder, I should check and see what the water levels are at as of now. That inflow down there has been roaring pretty much constantly.
We were supposed to get an inch or 2 yesterday, or an inch, and then it never happened, never rained. What's your day? You go around checking up on nests at this point?
Yeah, most of our nests have hatched. We have a couple we're keeping an eye on, but I think at this point they're all over incubating.
The camera, the circuit, solar panels, and
upper level is 504.3.
Okay, so about 7/10 of a.
Yeah, 3/4 of a foot above full level,
Wow.
which is a lot for like late July.
Yeah.
That's not.
We were higher than this in May,
Mhm.
but then it started going down, and then we got all that rain. And
Yeah, there was a
July,
period in May when we actually did go over, I think, one of the previous maximum water levels for a little bit. And then now we're definitely trending upwards. So we'll see. I don't know what, like, the rate of I don't know what the rate of loss is compared to the rate of inflow. Like, I would imagine that probably the lake loses more than is going into it. But with all this rain, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what it holds for the rest of the summer, just with the water levels. But it hasn't been like completely record breaking, but it has been a lot. I mean, I've seen so many flooded docks around here. It's kind of crazy. And even like a couple private docks, even some of I think the public ones at Shep's Boatyard are, or at least like the ones at the boat launch there are getting partially flooded, which is nuts.
Yeah.
And then yeah, it's crazy. But
All right, well, listen, we're getting wind noise now.
All right.
And so let's thank everybody for the time. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for having
again,
me.
a reminder of my presentation tomorrow night at 7. Try to record it. I don't have any. We'll see what we can do. And other than that, see you next spring. Usually we go live about the first week of May 3rd, May 5th, something like that, at the LoonCam 1 site. This site here's taken on an earlier couple weeks than it used to do, so we'll catch it as we catch it. Hopefully we'll have loon hatches at the LoonCam 1. We didn't have one this year.
Yeah, that was such a bummer.
Yeah, it was a.
What did it get flooded?
No, there were 5 loons, and they just kept fighting.
Oh, yeah, it's a small area where that is too. Sometimes that happens. They just kind of fight.
I mean, even this nest here went unused. I think it was 2 years ago.
Oh wow.
We had a territorial dispute, and that's when that new male that came in, the abandoned male, he took over. And then last year was his first year as build the nest. And this year is,
Yeah, that's the thing with loons, because they live for so long. There's certainly like a period of like they won't have chicks. It just takes them some time to figure things out. And you know, when you can have, if they live, you know, if you abandon them as an adult and they have 30 years, that's a lot of breeding seasons.
We didn't have the infrared really well cooking at night.
Yeah, that nest was such a bummer.
Yeah, he just sort of. But they have never had a successful hatch there. That's the 3rd year, maybe 4th year that they've tried.
There they go again.
Wow. The eagle?
No, the loon.
Oh, the loon. Yeah.
Maybe it's we did see it was last night when we were out. We did hear a juvenile bald eagle or like a eaglet calling around here, so there's certainly some activity.
There's no shortage of eagles around here.
No. But yeah, and then I'll see if I can make it. I'm not sure. I might be banding with John on Thursday, so I don't know if I'll be able to come, but I'll try.
All right, great. All right, well, thanks again, everybody. We're going to shut her down now, and